Date with a Debut is recorded and produced on Awabakal country. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. This episode is part 2 of a 2-part discussion I had with Claudine Tinellis, host of Talking Aussie Books. You can check out part 1 in the description, where Claudine gave a deep dive into the creation of her show and discussed some of our favourite debuts of 2026 so far. Hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you haven't already, check out Claudine's podcast, Talking Aussie Books, in the description. Welcome to Date with a Debut, a podcast about debut authors, their incredible books, and their journeys to publication. If you are looking for a new author to discover or writing inspiration for your own story and you don't know where to start, this is the place to be. I'm Nick Wasiliev, host of the show, and I'm delighted to welcome another debut author in today's episode. You can find any books mentioned in today's podcast down in the description. We will discuss mild spoilers ahead, so I recommend you grab yourself a copy of the book now, or at least very soon. Wherever you are listening, thank you for listening with us and supporting the Australian book industry, and if you enjoy the show, hit us with a review, a rating, or a thumbs up wherever you get your podcasts. Lastly, this episode is brought to you by Podpixels, the ultimate storytelling tool for passionate podcasters. More on them later in the show.
Nick, so moving on from our book recommendations, you and I, as we've already said, we speak to so many authors, and I feel like at the moment there's quite a lot of negativity around the industry. We've got the challenge that AI poses and the threat that it poses to authors and the suspicion that it casts over the industry now. But there's also the sense that perhaps people aren't reading as much now as they did beforehand, and therefore there's less opportunity for writers to break in. But at the same time, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, objectively speaking, it's never been easier to be published. I mean, people can choose to indie publish. There's a few hybrid publishing models around. We can pitch to digital first publishers. And especially here in Australia, where writers don't necessarily need an agent to be able to pitch their work to publishers. And so you and I see every day that people are still breaking through. I mean, you based your whole show on the fact that people are breaking through all the time. And I too am always interviewing debut authors. So in relation to the authors that are having success, do you think there are any commonalities, anything that you could point to that suggests where the industry interest lies or where reader interest lies, or is it random?
This is a big question, and I appreciate the chance to talk to you about it, because we're lucky that we get the chance to chat to so many authors and get sort of different perspectives on it. The industry is in such an interesting place right now. I think that there's been so many discussions around kind of the status that AI will have, the impact that AI will have. I think that particularly, and I will kind of preface that I've got all I can give is my own opinion on it. There's been the whole controversies around, the impact of AI books, and there's of hearing stories about how when one famous author publishes a book, a bunch of people publish 3 books which are summaries of the book feeding their book through an AI filter, and trying to do publish 2 or 3 books to try and scalp off their earnings on opening day. And then there's the whole controversy around Shy Girl, which kind of really gripped the industry and kind of brought a whole bunch of topics and discussions to the forefront, which I have a whole bunch of other opinions on that. But I do think it is the concerns about people reading less is true. I think it's the nature of with the increasing crazy world that is social media, people's attention spans are getting shorter. But I do think that there is a growing interest in. I think that it would be wrong to assume that books are on the ropes, because we do have this amazing thing, for example, called Book Talk, which I think has become the new book recommendation section of this generation. It's kind of like recommending, it's the new word of mouth in a way. It's just online, it's in a different environment. It's why you're seeing so many authors like Emily Henry or Taylor Jenkins Reid or Australian contemporaries blowing up because the moment that they get really popular on there and people recommend this book was amazing, it blew my mind. Check out this amazing scene, these amazing scenes like chapter 41 from A Court of from Sarah J. Maas's debut. The moment that you have that sort of discourse and discussion, it encourages people to go and check out the books for themselves. So I think that we're sitting in an interesting place. I think right now, the industry has always been kind of one. I think it's also one of those industries where it's predominantly female driven as well, which kind of going back to the topic about about male and female writers and stuff. I think it's one of those few industries where I think a lot of it is driven by women. It's also it's also a situation where the industry is really it's having to adapt very, very quickly. There's the traditional publishing model has been around for so many years, but in a time that we live in, it has to adapt increasingly so, because the world that we're living in is very different to what the traditional model was working in. I think that you are absolutely right. It has never been easier to be published. There is nothing wrong either. I think the stigma around indie publishing or custom publishing is rapidly deteriorating. People want to take their own, control of their own destinies in that sort of regard. I think that is something that is an option available to people. I do think that one of the side effects of BookTok is that it prioritizes things like your romance, like your fantasy. I think that's in some of those instances it does put other genres, maybe even have them on the run a little bit. I love literary fiction. I love deep dives into literary fiction. I love psychological thrillers. Thrillers can do well on TikTok, but even like more horror. Horror is seen as a bit of a taboo word, I'd argue, in online these days, because people are like, oh, it's intense subject matter, we're not going to talk about it. But there are amazing horror books out there that dive into that sort of stuff. There are amazing literary books that dive into that sort of stuff out there. I think there is, I like the idea that BookTok is getting people to read. That's what I'm really excited about. And if you get that bug, it definitely provides that, and it gets readers excited. I also am hoping that it can be used as a tool, for example, to open up people's interest beyond the world of just, those popular books that are really, really good. And discovering there is few things more enjoyable than discovering an author at the start of their career with their debut novel and following that career and seeing where they go. There's been so many authors who I've had the privilege of interviewing who have now gone on and achieved huge success. I mean, the first one that I interviewed, I remember interviewing Lynette Noni for the first, and look how big she is now. She is absolutely killing it with her series, like talking about The Prison Healer. We were there at the beginning, back in Booktopia days. So I think it's the interest in kind of answer this question. It's such a big question, and I'm sorry for rambling on, but I think it's easier to get published than ever. It's harder in this kind of environment where you've not only got the pressure of something like AI, but also keeping people's attention as much so. The whole idea of a book is hold my attention. It's kind of does it hard. It's the art form that does it more than anyone else. But I think it's harder to cut through. But in saying that, it's also never been an easier time to get started in that sort of sense.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think you've distilled it accurately. I think it is easier to get started and easier to get published, but breaking through and finding success is very difficult. And I think that's where you and I come in, where we sort of aids to the Australian publishing industry in many ways and trying to support and promote particularly new authors, but also mid-list authors who struggle to sort of break into that sort of next level. And I think BookTok, you're absolutely right. I think BookTok is a terrific tool. I just wish BookTokers would focus more on Australian titles, because this is my shtick. This is what I'm all about. I'm all about supporting Aussie authors, as you are too, Nick. And I think that I would love to see something like BookTok really focusing on Australian titles, or the BookTokers, or the Australian BookTokers, because the reality is, as much as I love and enjoy international titles, I just picked up Lily King's Heart the Lover the other day after seeing her open the Sydney Writers' Festival. I love, jumping on the bandwagon of all of these big international selling titles. But the reality is they don't need our support.
No. No.
The reality is Australian authors need our support. Australian authors need Australian readers to get behind them. And, we need to be buying Australian. We need to be supporting our local industry and make our industry thrive. As much as I love, and I'm sure I'm going to love Lily King, and I love Emily Henry, and I read so many other, international authors, but they're already successful. So we need to think about that as well.
The good thing is, as well, I can say with confidence, like off the back of that, I think it's kind of making that connection between the environment of going. Often maybe some book talkers will pursue one particular title because it's popular to do so. That's why you see Sarah J. Maas and Taylor Jenkins Reid and Emily Henry kind of plastered up in lights so often, because often those books do very, very well with the algorithm. But I do think you're absolutely right. There's something, and I can say with confidence that if a book talker started to do that, if book talkers did kind of say, here's an author that I don't know about that I think is really, really interesting. The great thing is that there are a lot of good authors out there that are getting published, that are Australian authors who are writing books of substance that, we've talked about 4 just literally off the cuff right now in this podcast, but there are so many authors out there whose books that I think are worth your time. Because if you love a good romance, I've had so many amazing romances come on the show this year. Bridie Blake, Amanda Hewitt. Bridie Blake's book was excellent, the Boyfriend Clause, which I'm so excited. She's just recently signed a new deal as well. That book made me laugh. That opening scene is one of the best scenes I've ever read in a romance book, period. It was phenomenal. It made me cack myself laughing. And again, it kind of shows to me that, hopefully if people start to focus more on the local level, and not have, those kind of authors, because it's so hard to get that cut through. If book talkers can get that sort of cut through, it changes the game completely for your debut novelists or your novelists that have published a great book and build up that audience. The good thing is as well is that, with a debut, you've just got that first book. As you start to build on that catalogue, it kind of hopefully creates a snowball effect as well. Actually, out of curiosity, like where are debut voices in 2026 in your opinion? Because what sort of trends are you seeing, with the kinds of books that are being published by debuts, whether it be Australian or, international? But of course, we're on the Australian pulse per se. But what are you seeing from a debut perspective?
What I'm seeing and what I'm really loving is own voices stories. So I'm loving stories that draw on people's own experiences, now, whether that's, their own cultural experiences or, just the way that they identify. I think these are the stories that I'm really leaning into at the moment, and mostly because that's what I'm writing. And for the very longest time, I thought I had to write in a particular way in order to get a publisher's attention. And then over the last few years, I've really seen a rise in these own voices stories that tell about average Australian experiences, but from different perspectives. Now, whether that's, queer stories or whether it's, stories from different sort of cultural identities or, family stories that, don't fit the norm, all of those things, they're the stories that I'm really leaning into. And even, so to speak, people with particular, specialties, people that, have experience in certain areas, medical experiences or legal knowledge, people who draw on their own experiences and then create something and put it into a book, I think is what is really resonating with me. And I think publishing is starting to respond. They have. And look, we just saw that Angie Faye Martin, a brilliant debut novelist, has just taken out the ARBIA Award for the Best New Writer I think the Arbias were last night. And,
I lose track of where they start.
Yeah. I think I saw all the announcements coming through last night. I mean, own voice a story, an Indigenous, from an Indigenous perspective, a brilliant story. We need more of this. This is what we need. And I think publishing has been a little bit slow to the party in this regard, but I'm loving this direction.
I will say, if you're looking, I completely agree. Like, particularly when I like to coil it. There's a phrase that is described as it's called a yoink and twist, where like someone takes something or like an established genre or whatever, and then puts their own perspective and color and view on it. Sometimes it can they deliberately directly reference it, or sometimes it's a play on established genres and tropes and stuff. Off the back of your point, I was thinking about some great books that have kind of come through which have that own voice. Anything out of the sweatshop literary movement, I have been devouring. Like Dani Nor's memoir, How to Dodge Flying Sandals and Other Advice for Life. Natalia Figueroa.
I love that title.
Oh, yeah, it's so good. Natalia Figueroa Barroso's Hailstones Fell Without Rain, which is the first Spanglish novel published in Australia as well. In addition to that, Alejandro Martinez's Salsa in the Suburbs, which kind of also talks about, they're both from Uruguay, and their books touch on the fallout of the dictatorship in Uruguay. I love those books. Half Truth, Nadia Majuri. Yeah, she's a Tasmanian writer, but with her book kind of talks about Moroccan heritage, and that's a fantastic book and dives into that culture, which in ways that I didn't experience before. And I mean, the big one that has consistently been coming back to me time and time again is The Butterfly Women by Madeline Cleary, which has been a fantastic. If you have not read this, historical deep dive into the world of Little Lon, and it follows a serial killer, so there's a crime element to it, but there's also shows what historical novel that also shows what women went through living in colonial Melbourne. You can do a tour of it now. It is such an interesting book, so much research, so much detail, beautifully written and put together. It's been the book that has come back to me so many times. Even getting into genres like Jessica Mansour-Nara's The Farm. Her voice is amazing. It's kind of a thriller, psychological thriller set in the country, but it's kind of a bit of a deep dive as well into the challenges of kind of going back to fertility issues, which is a topic which is affecting a lot of people. There is no shortage of great yoinks and twists on established genres and people putting their own voice in it. That's where a lot of joy for debuts for me is that you've got your own, like, people are putting their own voice out there for the first time, and your voice, your natural voice, can build on the establishments of genres and topics and particular subject matter in unique and exciting ways. That's where the real excitement is for me, particularly doing this show, is that you'll have a great historical novel like Emma Payne's When Sleeping Women Wake, and that talks brilliantly about the world of Hong Kong during the Second World War, gave me insights into things I didn't know about, and historical elements that I didn't know about. And there is so much joy in diving into that. And yeah, that's what I'm optimistic about. The good thing is, if you give those books half a chance, they will win you over very, very quickly.
Yes, I agree. There are no shortage. And just to add my, selection, we've got anything by Shankari Chandran. We've got Aisha Inoon. We have Tess Woods. We have, I was thinking Winnie Dunn, Dirt Poor Islanders, that was shortlisted for the Miles Franklin Award last year. We have anything by Michael Muhammad Ahmed. His writing is incredible. There's no shortage, and yet I feel like, these stories, apart from Shankari Chandran, I think these stories are slow to find their audience, but we really need to be supporting these authors as much as we can.
Is that the solution then, in your opinion, to kind of the challenges that debut authors face? I mean, there is the whole other topic of AI, which I'm curious about how that is going to pan out, because the more I see the impact of AI, the more I think to myself that inevitably it's going to affect so many people that it will lead to incredible a lot of change. It's just I'm worried about how much damage it will cause between now and when that happens. When you hear about all of the stuff that's going on there, is it really a case of connectivity and really trying to make sure that if you have that platform, as much as you can, trying to open and give the opportunity for people to discover something new, a new author, a new voice, something that new of interest that is worth the reader's time?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, this too is a very big question. It's connectivity, but it's also funding. It's also supporting independent bookstores. It's publishers, properly investing in supporting and marketing these authors. I think you and I see so much that, there's no real rhyme or reason why one book is given a lot of support and another book equally as compelling, equally well written, just kind of languishes. It doesn't really go anywhere. And I think, publisher support, a good amount of spend to, properly, market and push the word out about the book. I can't think anymore, but I think is really central. I think we need, at a governmental level, we need to have proper funding. Like there's this sort of this national cultural submission process that's happening in conjunction with the ASA at the moment, where a lot of authors are coming out and saying, the government needs to do something about AI. The government needs to properly fund, our artistic sector. We need to make sure that authors are properly remunerated. We all know the dire statistics of authors only earning on average something like $18,000 per annum. Nobody can afford to have an artistic career or, a literary career as a full-time career unless they already are, financially stable when they come to it. There's so much in that. And, there are some people that have the ability to go, to go out and spruik their books and do go off their own bat and do book tours and speak to, booksellers around the country. But most people don't. Most people just don't have the reach themselves. And so, yeah, I think it's incumbent upon all sections of the Australian, publishing and literary community to come together to ensure that Australian authors' voices are amplified above the internationals, and it should be a case of, you loved Heart the Lover, then you're going to love, this local author just as much, it's a complex question.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you raise a great point about the entire situation that's been happening. I mean, there's been a lot of discourse about the situation with Writers Victoria getting completely defunded, which is just incredible to me that is the case. And it's great to see that they got the signatures that they did to actually submit it to government, and actually creating those environments. I take confidence from, I will say that there is increasing indications about the actual value that art has. When I look at the situation like the basic income funding for the arts in Ireland, that has proven a massive success that everyone is taking notice of, where they basically didn't provide all income, but basically provided a very basic income for artists to be able to live and get by. And take that financial pressure off it. They did a trial with 2,000 artists, and they found that for every dollar they put in, which allowed the artists to focus on their craft and their work, they actually got $1.38 a euro 38 in return. So it actually not only paid for itself, but also made a sizable amount of income back, if given the chance. The value of kind of prioritizing arts and giving artists a chance to do it. They've made that program permanent now. They did it as a trial. They're about to expand it and double the size of it in September. So I think, showing I have confidence and optimism. I mean, I'm realistic about the challenges that they say, because, as you correctly point out from the ASA figures, those you need to be able to have to make a living being a writer, and often writers don't. It's often a side hustle. Podcast for me is a side hustle. That's the reality of it. Same case in point. But I'm optimistic that, even though the world seems a little gloom out there, there is small pockets and things that are happening that show that if pointed in the right direction, creatives can surprise you. And that does give me, I'm realistic but optimistic.
Indeed. Well, I'm showing my optimism by continuing to write, even though there's very little chance of my book making it through this very onerous process. And then, even if it does, the chance of it being successful are quite remote. But writing and being involved in a creative industry is a leap of faith.
It is, and also I wouldn't be disheartened even if you look at this whole situation with AI and go, oh, what's the point of writing? Write because it's fun. Write because you enjoy it. Like, I think that's a key thing that you should always remember. Don't do it because, I'm worried about making money in X, Y, and Z. You're putting the business plan before the entire reason that you're doing it in the first place, which is it's fun. It's meant to be something that brings you joy. You have this story that you are compelled to put out there into the world. Just because there's, a situation going on with artificial intelligence doesn't mean that you still don't have your own voice that you can put on the page. Yeah. You absolutely can.
I agree.
Do it for you. That would be another key point. If any people are listening to this going like, well, what's the point of me writing because it's going to be taken by X, Y, and Z or whatever, you still have your own voice and that can't be taken away.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more, Nick.
Hey everyone, Nick here. I'm excited to announce that I've launched a brand new book newsletter featuring book reviews, recommendations, latest news from the publishing world, opinion pieces, short stories, and more. One monthly newsletter, no spam, just the good book stuff. The sort of email you're glad shows up in your inbox. Sign up now for free, and for a small additional monthly fee, get early access to Date with a Debut episodes and exclusive content, including special extra episodes with our guests, Second Date, where they run another gauntlet of rapid-fire questions. Subscribe to my newsletter in the show notes below.
Nick, I kind of thought we might venture into a sort of, quick draw kind of question and answer session right now. So to start off with, what has been your favourite debut read so far this year?
It's so funny to get these questions put at me because doing a quick fire is something that I often do to other authors. So now I'm getting a recipe, like my own medicine served right back at me. So favorite debut read so far this year, genuinely an impossible question. This is cruel and thank you very much for that. But there have been so many amazing debuts this year. And I've already shouted out a couple like Katie Hoskins and Melissa Sharman. There's another book that I want to shout out in this. It scratched a different itch for me. It really did. And that is Life Drawing by Emily Ligazzolo. So Emily, I knew Emily for years from my days at Booktopia. She'd been, she's established in the industry, working at a shed. And she did this lit-fic examination of women's bodies in this book. And the inspiration for it came from going to a life drawing class and, in her eyes, experiencing body neutrality for the first time ever. And it follows this romantic relationship over many years. The book is split up into 3 different parts. This romantic relationship between 2 people over the course of college and then marriage and then kids, but it also is an examination of the relationship women have with their own bodies, and that there's a lot of power associated with that. Time affects a woman's body a lot through children, through age. There's a lot of different associations assigned to women's bodies in often negative connotations and implications through kind of patriarchal structures that have been around for such a long time. It was such a fascinating subject to dive into, and I think Emily did an amazing job with this book. And particularly if you're someone who has has a challenging relationship with your own body, I give this one a shot, because I think it will touch on subjects and topics that I think need to be touched on, and I think will draw. She expresses things in ways about the human body that I'm so glad that someone put it onto the page. It's a fantastic book.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm looking forward to reading that too. What about a debut that is not yet out, but you're looking forward to reading?
Oh, yes. Okay, so I have a book for you, Claudine. I did an interview yesterday with an author called Jane R. Miles. Her book is a psychological thriller called Stay Buried. And this book floored me. It was phenomenal. Well, I did a discussion with her. Her book is coming out at the end of July. Let me give you the pitch. December 1974, Darwin. What happened in December 1974 in Darwin?
Oh, wasn't Cyclone Tracy?
It was Cyclone Tracy. So on the
Was
eve
it
of
74? I
Cyclone
thought it was 71. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
74, 74,
Yeah.
Cyclone Tracy, a significant moment in Australian history occurred. At the same night, four young girls go missing from, and no one ever sees them. No one knows what happens to them. The entire story of this book is around how it cuts back and forth between what happened that night between these four women who suddenly disappeared, and then 30 years later, where the families come together, these women become known as the angels of Darwin. No one knows what happened to them. There's a whole legend about them. But one of them comes back 30 years later. This story is incredible. We jump back and forth between these two different mindsets and viewpoints of what happened. And if you want a great psychological thriller that reveals things to you slowly, gradually, this is it. I finished the book and I had to sit in the darkness for a little while and contemplate it. It takes you to some tough places, but it is also an incredibly rewarding book. Comes out in July. Get it. Stay Buried. Stay Buried by Jane R. Miles.
Fantastic. Love that. Okay, moving on. What is your favorite book genre?
Oh, that's hard because I do doing the show. You get a new appreciation for different genres that I would not normally touch on, like romance and fantasy. My go-to is lit fic. I love a good literary fiction. I love books that kind of grab you and shake you down and hold you in place. You are commanded to keep watching, to keep reading rather. And so psychological thrillers, drama. I love a good drama novel. Literary fiction is my jam. And funnily enough, anytime I go into that, even if my way in was like other breakout novels that kind of have that intensity, but even diving into other subjects, genres like sci-fi or fantasy kind of has been a way in through that kind of intensity of subject matter. A great example of that would be Animals in That Country by Laura Jean McKay. That is a foundational text for me. It's a book I've never ever had the chance to discuss. Also a debut novel, I will also add. That book floored me in terms of sheer intensity, but also diving into other subject matters. And for me, it's literary fiction, drama, thriller. I love that genre so much.
Brilliant. Next question. Your favorite book to screen adaptation of an Australian book?
This is hard. These questions are hard. Now I can see why everyone goes, Nick, these quick fires are so hard. Why would you do this to yourself? So I'm getting my karma here. So it's a toss-up for two between me. A foundational text for me and for my book for When Men Cry was Wake and Fright. I was, floored by it. And my first experience was seeing the film. And it's an amazing film if you haven't seen it. It's absolutely incredible, set in the kind of country in the outback. It's kind of got a lot of the stereotypes that are often associated with Australian new wave cinema. It's so cinematic. It kind of captures that desolate feeling. A more recent one though, I'm torn between two. And I must say, I really loved The Dry, the film. Like I watched the film before I read the book, which I kind of talked about when I had Jane. I was lucky enough to chat with Jane Harper. And she was like, I don't judge whichever way you go about it, because the movie turns you on to can turn you on to the book. It can work both ways. Like they're companion pieces. I thought that movie was really, really good. And even more so, I just loved how protective Eric Bana is of Aaron Falk. Like he is protective of him. Also, the fact that he didn't have to learn an American accent. It made me realize how good the
Yes.
Australian accent actually is. So those would be my two answers to that question.
Oh, love it. Love it. Now, if you could have dinner with a debut Aussie author, who would you choose?
So it has to be a debut, like they've only put out one book?
No, I mean, I guess we'll change it to, if you could have dinner with an Aussie author, who would you choose?
Can they be dead or alive? I'm so changing the chat. I'm changing. Can they be dead or alive? It can be anyone?
Whomever you like.
Oh, then I have an answer then. John Marsden. John Marsden. He is, for me, he is it. I was very, very lucky to have him as do a quote for my book, For When Men Cry. And he, for me, like Norton's Hut was a transformational text. The Journey was a very important book in the context of my family. I mean, Tomorrow When the War Began. His books were beautiful. They treated, even though they were for a YA audience, they treated that YA audience with respect. They didn't sugarcoat the world. I miss that man very, very much. I miss him a lot. When he passed away, that was a very, very hard day because he also was a very kind soul and wasn't challenged. He had lots of challenges in his own life, and he didn't let that color the person who he was. So yeah, he would be the person I could sit and listen and just chat with him forever. I think I miss that man very, very much. So that's who I would have dinner with.
That's a beautiful answer, Nick. Thank you so much for sharing that.
That's okay. And in typical fashion, let's flip it on you now because we have rapid fire questions. And let's throw that question back at you, actually. Let's do, for me, I've got a few. If you could have any three authors together at a dinner party? Let's do a dinner party scenario. Who would you pick and why would you pick them?
Okay. Look, I would pick Diana Gabaldon, who is the author of the Outlander series, because I think not only is she incredibly successful, but she is super smart. And I might be shooting myself in the foot a little bit because I probably wouldn't be up to, at her intellectual level and probably wouldn't be able to converse with her. And she doesn't suffer fools lightly, but I think she's an incredible woman, and the success that she's had with the Outlander series and how prolific she is and just how smart she is, really makes me want to sit her down and just have a chat about all things related to Outlander and her life generally. I mean, she's incredibly well educated. So she would be one. I have had the privilege of speaking to Shankari Chandran a number of times in sort of very casual settings and even on the podcast. But I feel like, she would be a match intellectually for Diana Gabaldon. I think without a doubt she would be an incredible dinner party guest. So I would have Shankari Chandran. And I would also have Holly Ringland because I think Holly is the most beautiful human being. So genuine, so heartfelt, so genuinely joyful in her life that I think she would be the perfect complement to finish my party of three at this dinner table.
Phenomenal answers. I will say, Shankari Chandran is amazing. I was lucky enough to host her on a panel at the Newcastle Writers Festival talking about the power of place. Could have listened to her talk all day,
I know,
every day, about unfinished. I think that was Unfinished Business we talked about.
Yeah.
And God, Holly Ringland. I want Holly Ringland to come on the show. She's in my top three. I love her. I have so many questions about Holly to put to Holly. So I'm going to try and put that out into the ether because I would love to have her on for a debut revisited episode and just talk to her about it because I think she's got a new book coming out as well. So
she does in September. So would be the perfect opportunity for you to invite her onto the podcast. And she is just the most glorious guest. And you'd have to do very little work because you just ask one question and it just pours out of her. Yes, I love it. I love it.
Putting it out into the ether.
Enjoy.
Yeah, putting it out into the ether officially now. What's on your TBR pile?
Oh, like you, Nick, I have a pile that goes beyond the height of my house. My husband is constantly building bookshelves for me to house all of the books that I have all over my floor and all over my desk. But to give you some idea. I currently have Aisha Inun's new book, The Sisters of Serendib, on my TBR. I have The Society of Literary Marauders by Perth-based author Sasha Wasley. I have a new debut by Rachel Fox McLeod called Disgraceful. That's coming out soon. I have Dove by Georgia Harper. I have The Couples Retreat by Mercedes Mercier. I have The Bookshop of Buried Pasts by Sarah Clutton. And I have Billy King by Shannon Kelly White. That's just a small selection of the huge number of unread books on my TBR at the moment.
God, that is a list and a half. Like, I will say, that's one of the negatives of doing this show. Like, I'm so focused on the debut that then, like, you're on to the next debut and you don't realize, oh, people have actually continued to put out books, and so you get so far behind on their bibliography. It means at some point I'm going to have to go back and revisit it. Poor me. Oh, man.
Too many books and too little time.
So true. Off the back of that, do you have a favorite word?
Do I have a favorite word? I don't know if it's my favorite word, but it's probably my most used word, and it's absolutely. I say absolutely all the time. It's mortifying when I listen back to podcast episodes that I've recorded, how often I say this word. And I don't know how to stop myself from saying it.
It's a good word, I will say. Like, I think I've had absolutely on this, like mentioned in answer to this question on the normal show a few times. It's a good word. It is a good word. Off the back of that, you and I do podcasts. There are so many crazy things that happen behind the scenes that never make it to live air. What's the craziest behind the scenes story that you've had while Talking Aussie Books?
Okay, I have two, and I have told this story a number of times. So for any listeners who've heard these stories before, I apologise in advance. But they are the two that stand out in my memory. Very early on, when I started Talking Aussie Books in 2018, I asked somebody I knew to come onto the podcast. I didn't know this person very well at the time, and we recorded the entire episode. I was so delighted with how it turned out. And then when I went to listen back, I realised that I hadn't pressed record. And so I started I went into a complete hot flush. My entire body was on fire. I broke out in this horrible sweat when I realized that I would have to ring this person up. I mean, they were doing it for free. I had no idea if it was, if anyone was going to listen. It was a complete and utter shambles. So I had to ring this person and say, I'm so sorry, but it didn't record. Can we do it again? And like the true professional she was, she just went, yep, no problem, let's just do it now. So we ran through it all and did it again, and it was brilliant. But I from that day on, I never, ever, ever forgot to press record. And now I have it in big, bold letters across the top of my screen, press record. And I always say to authors when I start, I'm going to press record so I don't forget. And I always check that we're recording before we start asking questions. But that was just a pure rookie error. But it just showed me. And look, here I was trying to be professional and trying to be, be something I wasn't. Let's face it, at that time I had very little experience being a podcaster. And so it just felt to me that I had not only let myself down, but I had certainly let this author down by being less than professional in this space. But, thankfully she was very understanding and she was very happy to go through all of the questions again. But I could just sort of like hear the, take the deep breath, and she was like, right, okay, this woman.
Look, at least I think everyone has...
Sorry, what was that?
I was going to say, I feel like everyone has kind of a story like that where you're about to start recording or whatever, or you make a recording and something goes wrong. Like, it sounds so easy when we're here recording it live, but it can sometimes be so chaotic.
I know, heart in your mouth kind of stories with this all the time. But my second story was with an author that I didn't know at all, and I was asked to interview him, and that was great. And he obviously was a very busy man, and he had a business to run, and it was clear to me that he had been asked to do the podcast, but he didn't know who I was. He didn't really. I don't think he knew much about the podcast either, and so it seemed to me that it was a bit of an inconvenience. And so he was recording the episode on a street corner. So basically he was talking to me on the phone on a street corner. There were buses going by and there were, planes. He was in the middle of the city without a doubt, and the planes going overhead. There was a lot of traffic noise and that was not a fun episode, I have to say to you. And I have subsequently gone on to talk to authors about how to prepare for interviews, and I use that as an example all the time, where I'm like, give it the time that it needs and deserves, because that person is taking the time to interview you in just the same way that we like to honor authors by being prepared. I think authors need to, respect our time as interviewers and, respect the process, and at least sort of put yourself in a quiet room, that you're not going to be disturbed. I mean, interruptions happen. It's par for the course. The doorbell rings or the postman arrives and the dogs start barking. That's stuff that, you try as you might, you can't always account for. But this seemed like a deliberate kind of slap in the face to me. And I was too naive at the time to sort of say, okay, maybe you should go somewhere quieter and have, so that we can have a proper discussion. And to this day, I've not, I did post the episode, but I kind of thought to myself, I shouldn't have. I should have said no. I should have said I'm not going to do it. But, when you don't know what you don't know when you start off. And so, I just went ahead. They're my two stories.
It's good advice for it, I must say, because it does feel like that sometimes. My final question, and probably the final question of this podcast as well. Are you happy?
I am happy, but I'm going to answer it this way. I was at a yoga class yesterday, and the yoga instructor stood up and quoted a philosopher who I'd never heard of before, and I can't even remember the name of this person. But this person's advice was not so much advice, but their mantra was that I am complete, but I am not finished. And I think that is the best way that I would describe my life. I am complete in so many ways. I have a beautiful home and family. I'm surrounded by beautiful friends. I have fulfilling work, but I am not finished yet.
That is a wonderful answer, and I love it, and it is so true as well. I
should ask you the same question, Nick.
So my answer would be, I am happy occasionally. I think it's best to be honest. So if I'm having a crap day, own it. There's nothing wrong with that, with those feelings. Often there's association. You've got to be happy all the time. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm not complete. Sometimes I'm frustrated. Being honest with yourself is the most important thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on here. This brings us to the end of a very, very special episode. I've absolutely loved it. For everyone listening, if you haven't already, please go and check out Talking Aussie Books. I know that you absolutely love it. I'll provide a link in the description. And I'll say, Claudine, thank you so much. I cannot wait to tune into your next episode. I've been a long-time listener and admirer of the show. I'm sorry I haven't got the mug here with me, but it is still there. I still own it. And I can't wait to see what happens next, both with Talking Aussie Books and what comes next in your upcoming literary activities.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Nick.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Date with a Debut, and for listening to the Words and Nerds channel. You can buy all books mentioned in today's episode down in the description box, and if you enjoyed the show, drop us a review, leave us 5 stars or a thumbs up wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to hear episodes when they drop, be sure to subscribe to Words and Nerds, or you can subscribe to Date with a Debut on Podbean to hear the latest episodes as they drop. This episode was edited and produced by myself, Nick Wasiliev. Additional production credits to Dani V from Words and Nerds, music by Sakura HZ, and thanks to the publishers and authors who make this show possible. This show is sponsored by Podpixels. Date with a Debut is a Words and Nerds and Breathe Art podcast co-production, recorded and edited on the lands of the Awabakal